Well, thank you so much. I am going to attempt to clear myself a spot, and if I stay behind this podium, especially with this laptop here, you will never see me. I'm thinking about being like Michelle Bachman, and I'm going to start carrying around a little box for me to stand on, because the podiums are always taller than me, and then I feel like I have to shout. My voice carries enough anyway. I could probably speak to this room without a microphone. But I can't tell you how honored I am to be here. I have taken up a call from God. I believe that we have started a ministry. We are missionaries to the people of the United States in defense of the Constitution. We travel upwards of 6,000 miles a month, and we do it all by faith. I don't charge a dime for any of my speaking engagements. We work solely on the provision of people who donate and the sale of the books that I have. Because I believe that where God calls us, He will provide. I believe that my God does own the cattle on 1,000 hills, and that He has made promises like, I so clothe the grass in the field which is here today and gone tomorrow. How much more will I provide for you? You have not because you ask not. O ye of little faith, He says. Well, we stepped out on that mission to seek the Lord and seek what He had planned for us. We've been doing this for 2 years now. And as I told the men who were helping me in, Thursday I was in Fort Myers. I drove home for Thursday night, which is a 5-hour drive for me, left 6 o'clock Monday morning for Missouri to speak in Missouri Saturday afternoon. I left Saturday afternoon for Memphis. I spoke in Memphis on Sunday, and then Sunday evening I flew out to Vegas for 3 days to Sheriff Mack's Constitutional Sheriff's Conference. I just got back here yesterday. Here I am today. Tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock I fly to New York. I don't do that to glorify myself, you understand. I do that because I believe that God has a mission for us, and I'm trying to tell you that people need to hear these messages. The amazing thing about what I'm doing in New York, this is my 3rd visit to New York in 2 months, and I've been invited up there by the Catholic priests to teach on religious liberty. I'm a Baptist preacher's wife. The last time I was in New York, I taught 4 Catholic masses. God is moving, He is still involved, and He wants to hear from us. But you see, we get into a little bit of trouble when we lack in faith. We get into a little bit of trouble when we take things like, seek ye first the kingdom of God and His righteousness, and all things will be added unto you. And we start looking to seek ye first the government. You see, we're here to talk to you about the problems with this HHS mandate, but the problem is those are the symptoms of the disease and not the disease itself. The disease is the fact that we have 44% of our church-going Christians registered to vote. And of those 44% who are registered to vote, given what statistic you have, only 25 to 44% of those actually vote. So we wonder, as we scratch our heads and we get angry and we stomp our feet because we have to fight and scream and work to convince people that yes, we are a Christian nation built on Judeo-Christian views, and then they look at us and say, why doesn't the nation reflect that? Because we don't vote. The nation, our government, and our laws are the reflection of an uneducated electorate who no longer believes or never believed that God is the greatest provider in the universe. And that every time there's a problem that we can't handle for ourselves, we have to run to the government. We wonder why we have to take prayer out of church, out of schools, because the voters don't believe that anymore. We wonder why we have the church being invaded by government every time we turn around, because the Christians don't vote anymore, so we don't get legislators who believe and reflect our views. We are not a reflection of our government. Our government is a reflection of its people, and we are getting a marred and dirty reflection because those with the light do not shine. Our problem with this mandate is not the mandate. Our problem with this mandate is a body of people who have lost their proper perspective. John Adams said it is liberty that must be supported at all hazards because we have a right to it derived from our Maker. God gave us liberty. And since God gave us liberty, we know that it is a good and perfect gift, and it is worth our every sacrifice. That's how our founders could say life, fortune, sacred honor. Because they knew that it was a gift from God. It was worth their sacrifice. And when you stand for the gifts of God, how can you be defeated? Even in the face of all opposition, even against all of the greatest odds, when you stand for something God has given you, you stand for God. And if God be for you, who can be against you? Amen. We have to go about changing the understanding in the minds of the people. We have got to get our believers to believe in God again. To believe that God is who He says He is. To believe that God will do what He says He will do. And that we need no other provider. Didn't we all just take an oath to God just a few minutes ago? You placed your hands on your heart. You were looking at the flag, but the hand on your heart is a symbol of pledging an oath to God. Because He's the creator of your heart. This is where He's supposed to be living. You're holding hands with God when you take a pledge. So I pledge allegiance to the flag and to the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible. We are having to fight, not only to convince a people, but to convince a world that we are, yes, one nation under God. And if we are one nation under God, then we are indivisible. Those phrases are next to each other for a reason, because you only have one choice, two options. You will either be one nation under God, or you'll be one nation under government. Because whom we serve will be our master. Who we look to for provision will be our slave driver. And God is the only good and gracious master that we have, which is why when we are one nation under God, we are indivisible. God's message is that you have to love your neighbor as you love yourself. What's government's message? Race war, class war, war on women, division, division, division. Only when we are one nation under God are we indivisible, because as we become one nation under government, we are torn asunder. And here we are, because we believe for a moment, or we say we didn't believe for a moment, that where God would call His people into a ministry, that He would provide for them. So our churches that are involved in medical institutions, our churches that are involved in food banks, our churches that are involved in schools, every day reaching, not to God, but to government. provisions. Do you know George Mueller? George Mueller had something like 10,000 orphanages with a multi-million-dollar ministry in the 1800s, never once took a dime from the government. Have we forgotten that friend? Do we think that we no longer need his assistance? If God can do that then, he can do that now. But we've started reaching in other ways, and then we start finding ourselves pushing back, because the problem is when you invite the government in, they're in. Right? How are you going to get them out? What is it? Liberty is two wolves and a sheep arguing what, or I'm sorry, democracy is two wolves and a sheep arguing what's for dinner. Liberty is a well-armed sheep. Right? But what happens if the wolf comes knocking on the door with satchels of money and says, "Hey sheep, let me in, I'll buy"? Does that make the scenario any better? The wolf is still in the house. Because when it comes down to it, he's going to eat you up and take his money home. We've got to get back to the understanding that God is able and God is willing. Stop listening to it's not any right-wing media, it's not left-wing media. It is right media and wrong media. I don't know if you saw this, but there's been direct email evidence of our government influencing media communications and news reports. Now, I know most of you probably already figured that was happening. I mean, my goodness, it was blatantly obvious. But thinking and believing is different than having direct, tangible evidence. If that's not enough to make you turn that nonsense off, I don't know what is. This mandate is not about abortion. This mandate is not about contraception. It is not about the government providing health care or eliminating opportunities to anything. It's about the government in the church, which is the violation of church and separation of church and state. And this is not something that our founders invented. This is not something that just creeped up in the last 225 years. The very foundation of our nation was built on 700 years of battle. 5 documents, the genealogy of the Constitution that I travel around and teach. 5 documents that had to be written before the Constitution could even have a glimmer of inspiration in the minds of our fathers. That first document, the 1100 Charter of Liberties, declared in one of its very first provisions that the church will be free from government intrusion. The Magna Carta, birthed from the 1100 Charter of Liberties, was brought about because the king was trying to pick who the archbishop was going to be. Then you have the Petition of Rights of 1628, the Grand Remonstrance of 1641, and the English Bill of Rights of 1689, all declaring that the church is to be free from government intrusion and that it is anti-liberty for the government to be involved in the conscience of men. Am I in your way? Okay. If we're going to fix this problem, we've got to stop breaking out the Band-Aids. And we need to start really curing the disease. And the only way we are going to cure this disease, if we have a proper perspective that this Constitution means something, It was built on over 700 years of experience, blood-bought experience. Our founders didn't invent it. And its purpose is to tell the government what it's supposed to do. It gives the government its job description and then assigns ownership of liberty to the people. Liberty is an inherent possession of men and not the gift of governments. And if we don't understand this proper perspective, we don't understand its purpose, we are going to lose government's proper position in the scheme of things. You see, these revolutions, these 5 documents born out of revolution, didn't come about because somebody woke up one day and said, hey, I got a great idea, let's make that happen. It happened because of government oppression. They said it was an effort to subvert and extirpate the religion of the nation. That means to overturn, undermine, completely destroy liberty and the religious principles of the nations for 700 years. It's time for us to do what Daniel Webster said. It's time for us to understand that we must stand, we must hold on to the Constitution and to the republic for which it stands, because miracles do not cluster. And what has happened once in 6,000 years may never happen again. He said, hold on to the Constitution, for if the American Constitution should fail, there will be anarchy throughout the world. We are the shining city on a hill. We are the last bastion of hope. We are liberty in its light throughout the world. But how will the light shine if those who bear the light hide it under a bushel? How will they know if the salt has lost its savor? This is not about health care. This is not about contraception. This is about the government interfering with our ability and our obligation to engage in the Great Commission. And make no mistake, we will be held accountable for it one day. One day we will stand before God and answer for what we've done here in our lifetime. And we must fight at every aspect to give the government no space. God said, give no space to the devil. You make your own application. As far as I'm concerned, if it's against the principles of God, if you're against the people of God doing what they've been called to do, you've just classified yourself. Amen. We've got to be about this business, and we've got to get rid of that spirit of fear, because persecution is coming, and we better start building that muscle of faith now so we have the proper strength when the time comes. Tell your friends, tell your neighbors, this is not about contraceptive. You can still go buy your birth control. It's not about abortion, although we believe that murder is murder. It's about keeping the government out of the church, and that is non-denominational.